I wouldn't send your kid to treatment yet. They haven't had consequences or whatever the case is. Not that everybody has to have like a rock bottom. I'm not saying that. But there have been some situations where, I've made an educated suggestion to say, maybe let this go for a little bit. Because, you send someone too early when they're not ready or don't necessarily need it, and you're doing it more as preventative because they're dabbling in stuff, that can go the wrong way. And
I went to that hospital because I was on acid, and I had what started out as a good acid trip. Turned out to be very bad. My family came to the hospital. I freaked out. I took about 8 people to, tie me down to a gurney. That didn't teach me my lesson. I overdosed on heroin and passed out, at 80 miles an hour in a car and hit a parked car.
I remember going to treatment up there, and it's all alcoholics and meth heads.
Yeah.
And I did a first step for my therapist that you share in your caseload, and it's like a list of all the drugs you've done. And people are like, GHB, what's that? What's ketamine?
Yeah. And I hadn't drank I didn't drink from 2012 until about 2 years ago. And the drinking was very slow. In fact, the drinking didn't snowball until a few months ago. But the drugs, from the time my father passed away, a little bit before that, until 2 months ago, it just got from worst to worst.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
And we have a gentleman by the name of Brian.
How you doing, guys?
Hello, Brian.
What's up, Brian?
Things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use. And thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message, right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. That was good. That was quick. I had a good breath in,
You rested up.
Yeah. Brian, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
So is it okay if I share how we know each other?
Of course.
Okay. So Brian is in fact a client right now here at Rock Recovery Center. And we like to incorporate clients every now and again, especially the ones that we feel like are really doing well inside the program. And Brian is obviously one of those people. And so we actually talked to Brian about coming on the podcast, and here we are. Ben, do you have anything you'd like to say
As far as Brian goes?
Yeah.
No, I think that this there's a couple things that I want to touch on for this episode in particular. And I think really for me, like what made me want to qualify him, so to speak, for coming on the podcast is there's a couple things in particular that like I think he's had some challenges and really has overcome it. And I want his personal insight on some of that stuff.
Cool.
So like master treatment plan type stuff,
Yeah. Well, we'll just get right into it, Brian. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, the listeners, and we'll go from there.
Okay. I'm 46 years old. From New York originally. Live in Philadelphia. I've been in and out of the rooms for about 34 years now. So I started partying when I was 12. I have ADHD. I'm gay. I pretty much started self-medicating at a very young age. When I was younger, I actually, back in the early 80s, the main thing was that you would either be given Benadryl, which was, one of the medications that they use for ADHD, or Ritalin. And my parents chose to give me Benadryl. So, unfortunately, it was basically like alcohol almost. It was kind of drugging you up a lot. So, I spent most of my childhood, vacillating between bouncing the walls and then, having to take this medicine. And, when I got into middle school, I was taken off of that medicine and I just had nowhere really to go with that. So I started self-medicating and kind of escalated from there. So,
why were you taking off the medicine in middle school? Like, was there something there?
Because I didn't really respond to Ritalin, and not very well, and the Benadryl it was making me too drowsy.
Okay.
So because I guess once the hyperactivity wore off a bit, there's only a certain point where the Benadryl it would make me a total zombie.
Wow.
So and at that point, Adderall really wasn't a thing, or at least I think maybe it was like in clinical trials, but it wasn't really something that they prescribed to people until maybe the mid to late 90s, which I was already out of high school by that point. So
let me touch on something real quick, because we talk about this pretty often in the past on episodes about diagnosing properly. And I always bring up the pre-screens, and people always tell me they got ADHD, and then they get here and they really don't present that way at all. Let me just throw this out there, and I'm going to follow it up with something too. Mm. In my opinion, I'm not a doctor, but definitely meets criteria for ADHD. Yeah. Like, dude,
without a doubt.
Yeah, it's quite entertaining at times. But with that being said, also, I want to follow up with this, where what a lot of people don't realize is that ADHD, if harnessed properly, if treated properly, it's actually like a superpower.
Yeah.
There's a gentleman that I would follow named James Yeager on YouTube. He had a real big YouTube channel. He has since passed away in the last about year or so. But definitely he ADHD. Like, there was no doubt in his mind. But he talks about it. He was abstained from all drugs and alcohol because his dad was an alcoholic, but he has this ADHD diagnosis. And he talks about how he harnesses his ADHD, and hence it made him super successful. And when he was able to focus, he took all that energy and like built an amazing life for himself, for his family, all the above. So, a lot of people look at it like it could cripple you, but the reality of the situation is it's like having a superpower that if you learn how to harness it properly and utilize it, can be for good.
Yeah, I mean, I even I took a speed reading class when I went back to school very late. When I was 35 when I went back, and I took a speed reading class. Actually, they offered it in community college, and it was like 3 weekends, and it was like 4 hours, consecutively, and I was able to actually read at a quicker pace, because if I was able to focus and read at a faster pace, I was able to retain it more, because at a slower pace, I would start to drift off. And, I found that as long as I actually had a physical book there and, had my finger there, I could kind of read it the way that most people would scan things. I was actually reading the entire text. And, I would never have gotten through school had I not done that. And I mean, I ended up graduating first in my class. However, when I was in, grade school, I was in special ed because I was so hyperactive that I wanted to learn what I wanted to learn when I wanted to learn it. So they really didn't know what to do with me. So when I was in kindergarten, they ended up having to place me for first and second grade in another school. And it kind of screwed me up in the head because, my friends at, my original school, they shipped me off to another school. They kind of said, oh, well, you were on the short bus, and, there was all those jokes or whatever. So when I came back to, in third grade, they actually put me back in my original school. And at that point, they had given me, I believe it was a CTVS test or something, and it was a standardized test. And they didn't teach me how to read until I was in second grade. And I had already known how to read at that point from my parents, because they would, make books, and they would put like, a picture of a cat. And, so by that point, they gave us like 2 weeks to learn how to read a book, and I read it in like an hour, or two. And, by the end of the first class, I read it. And when I was tested, they tested me at like a 10th grade or 11th grade level. So my mother basically went to the school board and was like, okay, if you don't, get him out of these classes, I'm going to sue you. So, so they put me into, in third grade, it was, partially, the special ed class in the morning, and then I'd go to like math, science, and history, for the afternoon. But back in the 80s, that's the kind of thing they did. They didn't really have tests to determine, your ability. It kind of, they lumped you into one group. So integrating into elementary school was really difficult for me. So, by the time I eventually got into middle school and high school, I was able to socially integrate, and I, was able to overcome that. But, like the drugs kind of, became a big part of my life because, I felt like an outcast because, I was dealing with that and being gay. And, it was just so many different, being pulled in so many different directions. I couldn't really, I would hop from group to group, and I never really feel like I fit in. Like I fit in enough that I could, be on, like on the surface, I could say hello to everybody and kind of have a little bit in common with everybody, but never really, fit in anywhere except for in the drug scene, because, when everybody's high, they're just kind of like,
right.
Slump back, when you slump back in a chair, you have plenty in common with people. So
I remember when this would have been last week that your family, or is it who's a musician or was
my brother? Yeah, my father and my brother.
Yeah. So like, there's I don't know the point in me bringing this up other than I found it rather fascinating, but they were like pretty big, like very good.
Yeah, my brother. So my brother was he was born 2 months premature. He was a tiny little kid, and my father used to give drum lessons, and my brother had a lot of learning disabilities. He wasn't able to, he wasn't good at math or science or any of the core competencies, but he would listen to my father give a lesson, drum lesson or anything, piano, guitar. And at 3 years old, my father would play it once or twice, and my brother would get up and play it note for note.
Wow!
Just watch him.
Wow.
He would just watch him play it once or twice, and I mean, it was just something I couldn't do. No matter how hard I tried, I could barely, play "Mary Had a Little Lamb."
Do you have any musical tendencies or not?
I mean, when I focus, I mean, I can pretty much, if I focus on doing something for any length of time, I can pick it up, but just not like that. I mean,
right.
I had a full studio in my house pretty much growing up, but my brother and my father were so talented that I just never really.
Yeah, it's like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah, I was, like I would sit in, sit in my house and read, or I would go outstairs and do gymnastics, or I kind of like I did all the things that nobody else in my family could do,
right.
Or wanted to do, because I figured then I wouldn't be, there was no benchmarks for me to be compared to. So,
right. So when did the drugs really enter into your life?
I would say when I was 12, really, I started drinking and smoking pot. I would say by 13 I was doing LSD and like mescaline, and then 14, 15 I started doing cocaine.
Wow.
17 I started doing heroin. I did that for about a year and a half, and then 18, 19 I started going. I lived on Long Island, so I started going into the city and doing like ecstasy and like club drugs like ketamine and meth.
So do you feel like that a lot of your addiction up to through that age period was more just kind of like to, I think you just said it, really to fit in, to kind of find your tribe and that sort of stuff?
Fit in, and my whole MO is almost to kind of hop from group to group, and I mean because the ADD made it difficult for me to really get to know somebody too well, because like I would either get too distracted, or I don't want to say I got bored easily per se, but I was so erratic. I mean, I never, like I would start to get to know somebody, and I'd be afraid for them to know too much about me, especially being in the closet. I was afraid. Back then it wasn't as accepted as it is now, so it was kind of like in the back of my head, it was like, okay, well, if people ever found out, I would just kill myself. I mean, that's just.
Wow, you thought that?
Oh yeah.
Wow. At what age did you come out?
I mean, pretty much. I started dating somebody about a week after high school, but I didn't really come out until I was still hiding it for about a year, until it just kind of, I was dating somebody and I went full in on the relationship, and I started doing heroin pretty much right away with this person. So, I got a little sloppy, obviously. So, it's kind of hard to, people started to notice the difference in me immediately. So, like I couldn't really hide the relationship, but it was a lot of, changing pronouns and, that sort of thing. But my mother actually found out because I was saying that I was staying at someone's house, and I was actually calling from a payphone because it's back in the 90s when you had pagers and cell phones. So so I mean, I would call from a payphone, and I would actually, I would my mother would page me, and like I would go to the same payphone and call her and say it was my friend's house. And then one day I called her, and I was so messed up that she had my sister go to my friend's house, and my sister said that she went up to the door, and the person that answered, it was actually my friend's house, and they said, oh, well, he, like,
he's not here.
Only been here a couple of times ever. And like that was where I'd been going for, like, every weekend for like the past like 9 months. So
according to you and your parents, but you had only been there a time or two.
Yeah. So
and you were with this relationship that you were in.
And it was actually somebody who was much older than me, and I said that he was my boss. So then it was like she put two and two together. Yeah. And at the time I was 17 and he was 30. So it was technically statutory rape. And then my mother was upset about that, mostly that. But I mean, she wasn't really cool with the gay thing at first. So she, threatened to call the cops, and it was just this whole thing. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was pretty bad.
So you're going through this time period of your life. It's in New York, and the gay scene, the drug scene, all of this. I mean, I assume what came with that is clubbing and the parties and everything. Did at what point did it really start to just things had to change for you?
Well, I mean, it was a lot of shifts. I mean, at that point, with the heroin and this guy, we were together for about a year and a half. I mean, I went to that hospital because I was on acid, and I had what started out as a good acid trip. Turned out to be very bad. My family came to the hospital. I freaked out. I took about 8 people to, tie me down to a gurney. That didn't teach me my lesson. I overdosed on heroin and passed out, at 80 miles an hour in a car, and hit a parked car around the block from the hospital. Ended up ripping out the IVs and walked out of the hospital. That pretty much was toward the end of my heroin run, which I ended by drinking for about a month very heavily to get off the heroin. And, that reignited my alcohol addiction. And then I thought that I'd switch over to party drugs, and I moved to New York City, and then I became a club kid. It was like trading one addiction for the other, because I just could never quell, the hyperactivity and and the attention deficit. And, I still wasn't really, okay with the gay thing. My family had accepted it by that point, and, we're okay with, even my ex at that point had moved in with my family, and I moved to New York City because we split up. And, so, I mean, it was kind of a crazy situation. And at that point, when I was in New York, I started escorting. I was, partying. I mean, I basically spent 5 years in New York just, partying and going to clubs. And, I like I said, I escorted. I worked in an S&M restaurant. I lived like this crazy, what was fun for the time being, but like really was, like an over the top life, which is like fun on paper. But I mean, like I could have very much, there's a lot of times that I'm surprised that I didn't get killed or,
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a different time, you didn't have cell phones, and, it's the kind of thing that if you tried to do it now, I mean, it's just, it's so dangerous. I mean, it's just like the things that I did when I was young, like I don't know how I survived. Yeah.
Well, you probably wouldn't survive if you tried doing those things today.
And I mean, and it's, everything, the drugs that are around now are so dangerous. I mean, the fentanyl and, I've, in the past, I would say 2 years, I've had about 18 people that I know overdosed. And I mean, it's,
yeah.
And I mean, the fact that I was still doing this, I wasn't doing fentanyl or anything, but I was doing crystal meth, up until a couple months ago. And I mean, like just the progression, throughout my life, I thought it was so much fun back then. And it's like, now it's like, homeless, people, everybody that I know is, half of them are homeless or, overdosing. And, it's just the situation has gotten so bad. And I mean, it's, like I've seen so many people die, or just, like so many people that are just out on the street that have just completely ruined their lives and are just not.
They're just lifeless.
Yeah.
I mean, they're alive, but there's not.
But barely, yeah.
Yeah.
They're just shells of themselves.
So you came in for I don't know how long, but you came in here, your drug of choice was crystal meth.
And and GHB.
What's GHB again?
Gamma hydroxybutyrate.
What is that?
So originally, what was that? The 90s when it started off?
Yeah.
So in the 90s, GNC actually sold it. I don't know where it originally came about, but it was sold as a supplement to help you sleep and would help. And your sleep would be so good that in theory, you would grow muscle because that's when your body grows and repairs itself.
Yeah.
So, but what ended up happening is people found out when they took a little bit of extra, there was definitely some euphoria with it. And it, a lot of people refer to Rufinol as the date rape drug.
Oh.
GHB is not the same as Rufinol, but also used as a date rape drug as well, but it suppresses you so much.
So it's like a downer.
Yeah, and it was really big in the rave scene because you would take your ecstasy, your MDMA, and then take GHB with it to kind of bring you down some.
But it's very volatile, and I mean it's a very, very low threshold to you could go from being very good to being passed out and ready to stop breathing,
and very small amounts.
Really? Yeah. I mean, it's in a matter of milliliters. So the difference between 2 to 3 milliliters could be you dying.
So we used to call them caps back in the day, and they would sell them like you go to a rave and someone would have a gallon of this stuff because you could make it at home too. And I knew a lot of people that did that after it got banned from GNC in stores and was made illegal. But we call them caps because you would literally take a small cap off of a water bottle, the little short white cap.
Yeah.
You would fill that, and that would be $5, and that was considered one serving. You could get away with taking maybe 2 or 3, but yeah, I had a good buddy that died at a house party we were at doing that.
Really?
On GHB. It was a big thing back then.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's
down here.
It's become in the gay community. It's become very big again. So it's but the thing is, combined with alcohol, it's really
deadly.
Dangerous. And the other thing is there's several different types, and people mix them, and you're supposed to time it a certain way, and drug addicts are not really good with timing shit.
So and like he's talking about, they would make them sodium based, which is salt, and that's the type that they sold at like GNC. But the easier way to make it was potassium based, and so the drug dealers were making it potassium based, and that was like even more potent, killing people. Yeah. So it's
so you can't get this stuff anymore.
Oh, you can.
Oh, yeah.
I mean you can, not legally.
So actually, we were just talking about this the other day randomly. It's funny you brought it up. It used to be something that I used regularly, and actually after the rave scene, I was more into my opiate addiction, and I had a friend. We were doctor shopping, and she all of a sudden came home with a bottle of, it's called Xyrem, XYREM, and it's actually pharmaceutical GHB, and you could still get it prescribed today. I imagine it's probably really hard to get it, prescription of it, but yeah, she used to get it by the bottle once a month and would just give it to me. But there are, I guess, medical uses for sedating people, stuff along those lines.
And the other thing, believe it or not, there's another form of it, which is, believe it or not, like a floor stripper. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you're putting in your body that you would need a certain license to get. That you could order it online, and like you would have to own a certain type of business or whatever, and people would order it online. I mean, it's just, that goes to show you what you're putting in your body. I mean,
I almost died on it once. That's what we were talking about the other day. I was outside of a bar, and I had a bottle of that Xyrem, and I was drinking, and I was just kept taking a little more, thinking I wasn't feeling it, and all of a sudden I just remember being out front of this bar. I start throwing up. And I'm like just holding myself up on my knees, like, Ben, do not close your eyes. Do not close your eyes. I remember I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And somehow like made it through that.
Did you go to the hospital?
Ended up not going to the hospital, no.
Wow.
Just kind of held myself up against a wall.
I don't know if this stuff wasn't taking place. I mean, either I was completely oblivious to it or nobody. I never heard of this stuff when I was using
They call it G sometimes.
I mean, it was just alcohol and, whiskey, beer, cocaine.
It has to do with where you're from, though, too.
Yeah,
like New York was the rave scene, and that was like the Michael Alec days and stuff like that.
Who?
Michael Party Monster. It's a movie with Macaulay Culkin.
Okay.
It's about like a guy. He was actually a club promoter in New York that he robbed his drug dealer and murdered him, chopped him up in pieces, and put him in a box and threw the box in the East River. Forgot to poke holes in it, and the box like floated, and they actually caught him. But he was going around throwing parties called the I Killed Angel parties, and like thought he was going to get away with it. He was delusional. He went through.
This is a true story.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What's his name?
Michael Alec. He's since passed away, but if you rent, there's a movie called Party Monster.
Yeah, you gotta check that movie out.
It was based on a book from James St. James, and it was named Disco Bloodbath originally, and then they actually made it into a movie. And I actually have an anecdotal story about it, which I was at the person's house who actually lived 3 floors above where this happened. And I just happened to be telling him about my previous roommate who was reading that book. And he was like, oh yeah, he's like, this is the same, unit that Michael lived in. He said it was 3 floors down. So he was like, this is the bath, he showed me his bathtub. He's like, all of a sudden I smelled this horrible smell, and he was showing me, he was like, he lived 3 floors down from me. So he showed me the bathtub. I had no idea I was in that building. I was just telling him about it. And then I went home and I told my new roommate about him, and it turned out that my new roommate was like, shh. And he was like, the guy that was with him was the guy who died. It was his cousin. I was like, how did I couldn't make this up if I tried.
Wow.
But yeah,
I have to check that out.
It does go back to culturally speaking, because like if you look at it, like me coming from South Florida, the rave scene was big down here. When I went to Minnesota, it was the same thing as you growing up in Pennsylvania. I remember going to treatment up there, and it's all alcoholics and meth heads.
Yeah.
And I did a first step for my therapist that you share in your caseload, and it's like a list of all the drugs you've done. And people are like, GHB, what's that? What's ketamine?
Yeah.
What's like? They're clueless, right?
Wow.
Don't know what Roxy's are. I'm
Yeah.
like, how do you not know what Roxy's are? It depends where you're from.
I didn't know. When I went to treatment and people were talking, I never even heard the term copping drugs. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Copping, going out and getting a cop. Like, what? I don't get it.
Tom's the kind of guy I'd be really funny to take to a rave.
Oh God.
Yeah. Brian, let's get to the recovery part of it now. How many times you been to treatment?
So I actually, I've been in and out of the rooms for years, but treatment I actually only went once, and it was for 12 days. My insurance only paid for 12 days, and it was essentially detox, really. I mean, and, maybe another 5 days of, treatment, and then, I mean, it didn't really do very much for me, obviously.
Well, let's go to the in and out of the rooms.
I was 12.
You were 12 years old when you went to...
Really? AA.
Did you go by way of like with your parents or
no? I mean, they would drop me off at meetings, and I would, it was bizarre. I mean, when I think about it now, I mean, it was in like 1990. It was my first.
Wow.
meeting.
Okay. So
And that was in New York.
Yeah, this is on Long Island. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was. I mean, and and honestly, at that point, and I did really want to get sober at that point because when I started drinking at first. It was like we found my friend's, parents' medicine cabinet, and it was just off to the races, and I mean, I would drink and, get sick and be like, oh, this is great,
Wow.
And, it was, and I mean, I remember I went home one day and then on a Sunday afternoon, rip roaring drunk. My parents took a video of me and played it back to me. And, I mean, I was swearing at them and, and they were like, do you want to be a total mess, for the rest of your life, or so they said, you need to go to AA. And I had a neighbor that had, a problem drinking, that went years before, and they gave me a big book and gave me a meeting list, and they dropped me off, and I ended up going to meetings. But it was it became one of those things where it did more harm than good, because then I would hear these stories from people, and I'd hear like war stories, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that's something I haven't done yet, because I was 12 years old. Once I had a little bit of sobriety under my belt, I was like, oh wow, look at all these cool things that I didn't do yet, and it wasn't cool at all. I mean, but
he just inadvertently brought up something I want to touch on real quick, and we premature intervention. You mentioned like you'd go to these meetings and kind of got exposed to more than you had even experienced, and this is, I would say, more rare than regular occurrence. But like there have been times where I've talked to parents on the phone, and I'm like, I wouldn't send your kid to treatment yet. They haven't had consequences or whatever the case is. Not that everybody has to have like a rock bottom. I'm not saying that. But there have been some situations where, I've made an educated suggestion to say, maybe let this go for a little bit. Because, you send someone too early when they're not ready or don't necessarily need it, and you're doing it more as preventative because they're dabbling in stuff. That can go the wrong way. And now that's not, again, I want to reiterate, that's a rare case that I've done that. I've only done that a couple times, where you got to tell parents, hey, slow it down a little bit. Sometimes this is part of growing up, experimenting with a little weed, a little Xanax is not the end of the world. Now, 6 months down the road, if this continues, we'll talk again, but
because it's entirely possible that you're introducing them to some hardcore drug addicts that
right.
I mean, it's like giving them tips, at that point. I mean, I hate to say it, but and especially if they're at a point where I mean, a 12-year-old with a bunch of adults. In AA, it's different because you're throwing them into a pack of people that are much older, whereas if it was a child and they were going to, a youth rehab, it would be a totally different story.
Yes.
But like AA, like that, I was being lumped in with people that, a lot of them, they had no restrictions, like you would with a rehab, where a lot of them would relapse. And then, it's like, not only do I now have, these older friends that have cars, but they all, they're relapsing, like left and right. And that's actually what happened. Is I ended up having somebody that had a car, that was a complete wild child. They were, like 18 years old. And, like I ended up going and doing coke with them. So,
wow.
I mean, it was.
So what was the longest that you've ever been clean?
When I went back to college, I actually was clean, but I was dry. I was clean for 4 years. And I worked the program for about 3 or 4 months. And by the end of that 4 years, I graduated. Like I said, I mean, did really well. But at that point, I got a job, started my career, worked in a restaurant, but a hotel restaurant, a very high-end hotel, and, was a senior manager. And I relapsed because my father had passed away, and I didn't have a program, and like I just didn't have, even though I had that time that I was dry, I didn't have. First of all, I let a lot of the connections that I had, in terms of AA and the rooms, I felt ashamed to go back to those people and say, oh hey, now I need you, because I didn't keep any contact with them, which was stupid on my part, but I just didn't have anyone to turn to in my own head.
So you had this experience. I want to bring this up real quick. Remember yesterday I was talking in group. I kept apologizing to y'all for being a little passionate for the day. So just to kind of paint a picture, yesterday in group, I just came out. We did a reading and we were discussing the reading. It was adventure group, and I just kind of stopped for a second and was like, I'm going to be straightforward with you. A lot of the people that I don't stay sober is because they're not willing to do the work. And I just to call it what it is, a lot of time they're lazy. Yeah. And you called it dry, not working a program, etc. But I'm bringing this up now because I wanted to mention to you, I was like feeling something in the universe yesterday. You know how I said to the group, I'm just tired of watching people die, especially when they have the solution in your hand.
Yeah.
And you said that you worked a program for 3 or 4 months. You had the solution in your hand, and that you made it 4 years, dry time. But it's funny because then last night I got news. I have a sponsee that died yesterday.
Oh,
really?
You know, and I just felt it in the universe, man. And the thing that gets me, this is why I was passionate yesterday. It's exactly what I said. And I'm like, go freaking figure. I said this in group yesterday.
And then you found out?
This guy, we worked steps together, had just over a year sobriety. And I remember, like, and the crappy part is he literally said to me, he's like, Ben, you know, man, lately I just really don't have time to work a program. I can't do step 12 and get sponsees. I really got to focus on, I'm trying to start a construction company, this, that, the other.
Yeah.
Like they put.
Was this the guy that did your bathroom?
No.
Do I know who it is?
I don't think so. It was one of my Fern House guys. Gentleman Adam, rest in peace. But, that's the part that frustrates me. Is they get to the point where now they have a choice. And they let it go. Everything that they got them to where they're at, they put on the back burner because they think that I got this now. And dude, it just kills me. Because now he's dead. And I love this dude. And I know his brother well. You know, man, the amount of people that we hurt.
A lot of times they take it for granted and they think that it's not going to be them.
But to make that conscious decision and literally say to me, you know, I don't have time right now because I need to focus on this. This is why I got sober, so I could do this. So I'm no longer going to do the things that got me sober, so I can do this because I got what I wanted. And I'm just, dude, it irks me. And not because I'm not angry at him or angry at the people, because I also understand that as somebody who's been to rehab multiple times. Like it took me 7.5 years from the time I decided to get sober till I got sober, so I get it. Like, but it's a pot calling the kettle black. But it's just so hard to watch. When they have it in their hand and then they intentionally let it go. It's like, gah.
Right.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm off my,
Sorry that happened.
off my soapbox.
Especially, I apologize that you had to find that out, especially, it is, and you were actually saying yesterday, in that group, like just when you start to feel that, that kind of angst and, that you feel like you have to explain that to people and then you go and have that happen. So that really.
Yeah.
So what, so you had 4 years sober while you were, or dry while you were in college. You took up hospitality management?
Yeah. So I was actually, I was probably out of school. Actually, it was actually like while I was out of school. So I mean, it was maybe even a little bit longer than 4 years. But it started to creep in. Like it was, like it was probably about like 5 years. However, the last year, it was like it started slowly. Like, I'll smoke a little bit of pot, and so it started to creep back in, and and I hadn't drank I didn't drink from 2012 until about 2 years ago. And the drinking was very slow. In fact, the drinking didn't snowball until a few months ago. But the drugs, from the time my father passed away, a little bit before that, until 2 months ago, it just got from worst to worst.
So the drinking, I have a question, and I hope I'm allowed to ask this of you. Because I remember, again, last week in that same situation, you were talking about your brother.
Yeah.
And how he had wet brain.
Yeah.
Do you think that was something that made it maybe like kept you from drinking?
Yeah, probably a big portion of it.
Do you mind sharing about what your brother went through?
Oh yeah. So my brother, about 11 or 12 years ago, my father gets a call that he apparently just started breaking all the windows in his house. He just completely freaked out.
This is the brother that plays music.
Yeah, the musician. So so my brother just started freaking out, started breaking windows. His neighbor, I guess, called the cops on him, and the police came, realized that he was in distress, called the paramedics, and they brought him into the hospital, and he was in the psych ward for like 7 years. And
7 years.
Yeah. So what happened was, he would wake up every single day, and he, would think that he had just got there. He'd been drinking for years and years, and but had what they call wet brain, but it was basically a form of dementia. And he could remember things from when he was a child or whatever, but like certain things, the way that the brain deteriorates, it's not linear. So he would remember things like my sister, her husband passed away, but he would ask her, how's he doing, and then ask in the same breath, how is her new boyfriend doing. And it didn't occur to him that that would have to be mutually exclusive.
Right.
So, and he doesn't know that he doesn't know that either of my parents have passed away. But there's just certain things, we had to stop visiting him because he would freak out every time that we visited. And, they wanted to place him in a nursing home. And they said, we're not going to be able to put him into a nursing home, if he's going to freak out every time that you come. So we had to stop visiting him, for a while. And then they finally, after about 7 years, placed him in a nursing home.
And is that where he is?
That's where he is now, yeah.
How old is he?
Now he's 62.
And so when did he get the wet brain? How old was he?
He was about 50.
And that was as a direct result of drinking.
Yeah. I mean, he and like I said, he was 2 months premature, so he always kind of had he had cognitive issues his entire life. And it was almost I would venture to say probably almost like a form of autism.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you able to go and see him, and like he knows?
My sister and my brother have recently gone to see him, so and he seems to have calmed down a bit. So I think now that I'm sober and in the right mind, I would like to visit him. Yeah.
Good. And he's in New York?
No, he's actually in Massachusetts.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to bring that up because obviously it's, we don't talk a lot about, you hear a lot about drugs and people overdosing and stuff like that. Yeah. But I mean, to have wet brain, I know for me personally, if I ever ended up in that position, I would just want you to kill me, honestly, because what life are you living at that point? Now, I easy for me to say, I know, my dad, he had a stroke. And so he has a lot of cognitive impairments.
Okay.
But I don't think that he would want to die.
Yeah.
I think that it's, so I'm glad your brother's still around. But I just thought it would be good to bring it up because it's alcohol induced.
Oh, yeah.
And people don't realize what it can do.
I was just having this discussion with some other professionals yesterday in the field that work for other facilities, and it's funny. We were talking about how alcohol right now in the treatment setting is making a big comeback. We're seeing less and less people.
We have
in
a
treatment.
lot right now.
We're seeing less and less people for fentanyl, more and more people for alcohol. But the thing that's really catching my eye is how young these real alcoholics are, dude. I mean, we're getting people in their girls in their 20s.
Oh, we got this girl that's 18.
Their liver's failing.
Yeah.
They're like at 25 years old, like real alcoholics, man. Yeah. It's becoming a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just recently lost a friend of mine. She
pull the mic 40. Up close on you.
Oh, sure. I just recently lost a friend of mine, and I mean, she was 40, and she died of, I guess, cirrhosis, I guess, and she had heart problems. Yeah, and I mean, she didn't do drugs, thank God, but I mean, otherwise she probably would have passed away a lot sooner. But yeah, I mean, and I think a lot with the fentanyl. I mean, I know a lot of people, and this is only anecdotally, but I mean, that did what I did when they were coming off of, opiates, especially like the fentanyl, because people are terrified of it. They'll go and, drink to come off of it on their own, and then they get addicted to the alcohol. So, I know a lot of people that I met in treatment that came in for alcohol after having come off of opiates because they tried to get off of that themselves, and now they're, alcoholics and their liver is failing because, they're...
I hope I'm right about my theory, but I do think opiates will never go away. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But our generation, we started off with the Oxycontins, progressed to heroin, that progressed to fentanyl. Where now that all the pain pill stuff is gone.
Yeah.
And the heroin's like gone.
Yeah.
Jumping straight to fentanyl, I think people are more scared now, and probably we're going to start to have less opiate addicts, because we always talk about how I forget the name of the family at the moment, Purdue Pharma with the Oxycontins, really started the opiate epidemic. The Sackler family, yes. Yeah. So I think we're getting to the tail end of that, where, I mean, dude, at this point, sad to say, opiate addicts are really dying off. Yeah. And I don't think people are starting on them as quickly. But
the scary thing is just the fact that you find it in you find it in meth, and you find it, so it's, people are dying from drugs, from fentanyl overdoses, people that don't even do opiates.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the scary thing is, I mean, in fact,
you don't even know you're doing it.
Yeah, you don't even know you're doing it, because a lot of people don't realize what they're doing is they're putting enough of it in there that you might be doing crappy meth, but you're getting addicted to it because they're putting fentanyl in it, because it's so much cheaper to get you addicted to it that, even though the meth is crappy, you still need something.
You don't feel like it's crappy.
Yeah, you don't, or even if you think it's crappy, but you still need it because you're addicted to the fentanyl. And so then eventually, that's my fear is that, people are thinking, okay, well, because they're not able to obtain, whatever the ephedra that they were able to back before they outlawed purchasing it in stores like they do now. So now they figured, okay, well, we'll get them addicted to this other really cheap substance, and then they'll switch over to the fentanyl, because I know people that have done that. That's my other concern.
Yeah,
because I've seen that happen, because I know a lot of meth heads that have gone more, like, it's tipped the scales from, like, they were more of a meth head and now they're more like of a fentanyl, and I'm like, how did that even happen? It's totally different
different drugs. Yeah.
Did you have a certain direction you want to go with this?
Well, I wanted to. Yeah. Huh?
Oh, ask what you were going to ask, because I was going to.
Well, I wanted to get into more of the treatment process now, and like kind of how things have been for you.
My question ties into that too. So that's good. Okay.
So you've been with us now 2 months, right?
About a month and a week or so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess first question is, like, what an elevator version of what made you like go to treatment?
It's just, my life got to the point where I isolated, my husband, my family, my friends, my true friends, and my, drug friends, or whatever, acquaintances, whatever you would consider them.
So it was a decision that you made on your own.
Reluctantly, I mean, at first, it kind of it got to the point where it was either that or I would be out on the street, because my husband and I were fighting. It was getting physical. It was just nobody wanted to be around me anymore. I was going to die. I was in the hospital twice. The month before I actually came here, I was in the hospital for overdoses on GHB twice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, that recent?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I mean, in fact, the one time I was literally about to they were doing my paperwork to discharge me, and I thought it was a good idea, since they didn't even take the drugs out of my pocket, that I would go and do a dose of it. That way I'd be high when I walked out. And the next thing I know, apparently I took my clothes off, I pulled the IVs out, and I was spurting blood all over the place and just walking around in a circle. And they were like, oh, well, we decided to keep you because you were like, they were like, we can't figure out why you all of a sudden, you seemed fine and you were high again. And it's like, well,
they didn't take your drugs?
They didn't realize what it was. I mean, it was in like
that's what
clear jar.
Just hit me, is I didn't realize the GHB stuff was that recent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I imagine no one in the hospital would recognize what that is today.
A lot of times they seem to think it's heroin. And that's the thing.
It's clear. It looks like water.
Well, they don't know what that is physically, what it looks like, but they don't recognize what you're on, because it mimics, a lot of it, like, like the nodding out, it mimics heroin a lot of times. Mm-hmm. So, like, I've been brought to the hospital and they're like, how is this dope head waking up so quickly? And it's because, it's not dope. And, when you get there, a lot of times I've actually had to explain to the nurses. They'd say, why are you, how are you so lucid all of a sudden? And I'd say, because it was GHB. And they're like, oh, okay.
What, does it wear off that fast?
Yeah, because, I mean, the half-life, it's like 45 minutes. However, if you get really G'd out on it, like somehow you get high for a lot longer. Like the half-life, it slows down your metabolism, so it actually becomes a longer half-life. It's very strange. That's why I'm saying it's so volatile, because depending on how you metabolize it, like once if your body can, depending on the amount of food in your system and how much sleep you've had and how much you have backed up in your body, it's not just like taking a hit of meth where it pretty much does the same amount, does the same thing for you almost every time. It's like, it could, depending on if you ate more protein versus carbs, it can have a totally different effect, and it can accumulate, in different ways. So I've had it where I've been completely incoherent and I looked like I was about to die 1 minute. And then, one time it happened to me, and someone called the cops, and I came right to, and just ran from the cops.
Off.
Yeah, scurried off. And
Nothing to see here.
Yeah. Kind of like the way, like a lizard and, like freezes, and you're like, yeah. And all of a sudden comes to life. Yeah. So
go ahead, Ben.
I wanted to touch back on the ADHD thing.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and say what's on my mind. Here we go. So, to be straightforward, when you got here, your ADHD was all over the place. I mean, and I'll disclose this to you now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were aware of it at the time, but we actually sat down as a staff and we're like, dude, this guy is bouncing off the walls.
Yeah, sure.
And to be
Keith,
straight,
remember Keith text us?
Yeah.
Keith, we have like this group text, and Keith is like, he's circular breathing.
Oh yeah, no.
He's like, he won't stop talking, and we're like, oh.
And that's pretty bad for Keith to be saying that.
I know, right?
Here's part of it too is, and I'll disclose this to you now, because you mentioned prior to the podcast, so I think you'll be all right with me saying this. Like, we even were like, as a therapeutic team, we have to be concerned for the whole community. Like, oh no, is Brian going to hijack the groups?
Yeah.
And stuff along those lines, because we were seeing some of that. To disclose that to you now. Oh, he knows. All right. So
believe me, I've been with Ben Harrison. So
okay.
He's told me.
Oh yeah, leave it. See, here I am tiptoeing. Ben Harrison. Just,
you're fine. No, Ben said that like 2 days after I met him.
Yeah,
so, really?
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But so, because we get this a lot, man. People come in here, clients who do have ADHD, and they don't do as well as you have with addressing the symptoms and whatnot. What do you think? Because from my perspective, Tom, do you agree? Like, it's toned down the symptoms, the negative symptoms of it.
Yeah.
What has worked for you? What, like, from your perspective?
I mean, I'm pretty open about it, and I think the fact that I will joke about it, and I give people the green light to tell me to shut up with it, in a nice way, or kind of to flag me and say, hey, shut up, really. I mean, there's no other way to say it, but or Nicole taught me to breathe and actually pause and think about what I'm going to say, or realize that it's okay that if I don't have something else to say, that I can just kind of not abruptly end what I'm saying, but to say, okay, I'm done, rather than feeling like I need to have a filler. So,
right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is that a thing amongst ADHD? Is like that you don't know when to stop talking?
Sometimes I feel like, so I'll have thoughts coming at me so quickly that I'll have 3 or 4 thoughts come in at the same time, and as I'm explaining something, somehow if I forget one of them, but I know that it's still in the back of my head and I want to get it out, I'll start to say other things so that eventually it'll come out.
Until it comes back.
Yeah, until it comes back. And what I realized is that I would just end it, and then if it doesn't come back, it'll eventually come out, and it's not the end of the world if it doesn't. I mean, I'll have other thoughts.
Dude, the way that you just explained that makes a lot of sense. I've never heard it described like that, but that's
I've had people tell me, Tom, when you tell a story, my wife does this a lot. She tells me that you don't know how to just tell the story and like get to the punchline. She's like, you have to go into every little detail, and like a story that could be 2 minutes turns into 10, and we do this a lot in public. Dr. T says that I have ADHD.
You're very entertaining. I love it when Tom tells stories.
Yeah, you just have to
harness it.
Well, you know what? It also, I mean, probably having a podcast is the best possible thing for you, because when you have, I know for me, if I know that everybody's listening to me, which is terrible to say, and I know that I have their attention, it's easier for me to be succinct because I don't have to gather everybody's attention. But if I see a group of people and one person's not listening, then I feel like I have to herd a bunch of butterflies, and
right.
And then I'll start to repeat myself, because I feel as if I need to repeat myself until everybody's all, there's a general consensus
Make
that
sure they
they're
got
all
the point.
listening. Yeah, and then I start to lose the people that were listening all along, which was my active audience in the first place. So I've just come to the realization that I don't have to have everybody listen to me all the time. Not that important. I don't necessarily have that much to say.
Dang, I'm glad I asked him for his insight on this, because the way that you explain it is very palatable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's this need to elaborate, this need to get every idea out. And in a way, like, I kind of looked at it as like a form of perfectionism, if you will. Like, I have to explain this perfectly so that I know that people comprehended it. I know they know where I'm coming from. And you got to fill that hole. I get that.
Because it's the same reason why I could be composed now, because I know that I don't have to compete with anybody to get a thought out. And it's not that I feel that I have to compete, or that it's just that I know that I won't have a distraction there to derail what I'm saying.
I feel like on this episode we got to like pull the cameras for YouTube and like put them up of Brian like out at the pool deck. Dude, we should mention that our operations staff loves having Brian at the house, dude. You want to tell him why? You tell him why.
Oh, what? Oh, because I clean everything,
dude. I mean, he's out there pressure washing the grill. Like,
do you think that's part of your ADHD, or is that just like you want to be busy, or what?
I mean, it's a lot of things. I like to be busy. I mean, there's only so much I can. I mean, I can only sit down and watch the same show over and over again so many times, or sit there and complain about how bored I am so many times before
you fix it.
Yeah.
We did have to tell him to take the disco lights down.
Yeah, the disco lights.
The pool waterfall area.
They're still up. They're in my room, but
so
yeah.
What's in store for you now? I mean, you got how much clean time now?
56 days, I believe.
How do you feel?
I feel good. I feel very good. But I still feel like I have a lot to learn. I'm trying not to be I feel good, but I can feel better. I'll say that.
Yeah. Do you have what's your plans after treatment, or no clue yet?
I mean, well, obviously go back home to Philadelphia. I'm probably, I have a cosmetology license. I have a business degree. So depending on, and it's hospitality business, it's kind of, I mean, the hospitality industry, I think, is a little, depending upon what part of it I go into, I enjoyed it, but it's, I don't know if I want to get into back into the same situation I was before, where I was working crazy hours, and there's a lot of drinking, obviously, and drugs in that industry. So I mean, even in the management position that I was in, there was still like a temptation there, but I was considering maybe getting like into the hotel side of it, possibly. So, that's in terms of professionally. I would like to, obviously, I want to kind of maybe get into H&I meetings, maybe chairing some H&I meetings or whatever when I get to that point, because from what I understand, that's like the best way to really stay sober, because you stay connected to people that are still going through recovery, and you see people that are still struggling, so you don't get so far away from the problem that you don't know what the solution is.
This goes back to what I was saying earlier about ADHD being like a superpower. Yeah. But like, same thing with crackheads and meth heads. There's nothing better than crackheads and meth heads studying the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, and if you can take all this energy that you have and put it into working a program, you're going to help a crap ton of people, dude. You like, if you do this, you are going to be a powerhouse with carrying this message, man. Like, and I really, like, for your sake and the rest of the world, to get a piece of Brian and what you bring to the table. Like, you really go out of here when you go home and do that. Regardless of what you do, I hope you take that 12-step and run with it, dude, because you got a lot to offer, man.
Yeah, I would say so.
If you take half this energy and put it into helping, you're going to help a lot of people. You got to take care of yourself, too.
Obviously,
Yeah, but, man.
Yeah. Well, that was fun.
Definitely.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing all that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me on.
We got food waiting for us downstairs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
Some Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A.
Brian, you're doing awesome, man. You're an asset to the community. We tell everybody, when people come in here, we want them to be an asset to the community, and you are.
Thank you
you're a joy to have around, and it'll be a sad day whenever you do graduate through the program and go back up to Philadelphia. But, we'll enjoy it while you're here.
Hopefully I will eventually move down to Florida. So
yeah. Well,
yeah. So it's definitely my snowbird,
Yeah, I don't blame you there. Ben, any final thoughts?
No, sir. Thanks for coming out, man.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All right. That is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.